Hello, my beautiful people. It's me, Kirsten, and this is the It's Giving Mystical podcast. Hey, and this is your podcast for the week ahead, the week of January 23rd. January. I keep hearing myself say that and be like, why do you say it that way? January 23rd. So we're rolling through this month. It feels both endless and like it's moving very quickly. The message from last week was this energy around awakening to love, feeling the places where new channels wanted to open, new energy wanted to flow in new directions through your system, through the system, noticing where there was tension between what you were supposed to be doing, so the things that you're building and maintaining and servicing and shepherding, and then the things that you are growing into, the things that we are growing into, and feeling the tension between those two things, maybe as kind of sexy tension and maybe as painful tension. Awakening to Love obviously has so many beautiful meanings, but I hope that at some point in the past week you were able to notice, like, yeah, new energy flows, new channels of, oh my God, I forgot, I love that, or oh, this is really exciting, I love that. And a lot for me is coming up around community. A lot for me is coming up around like the work of my hands. And awakening to love can be beautiful. It can be, I love fabric work, and I was dyeing a dress earlier and stitching this other thing. And I was like, oh my God, why do I forget how much I love to work with fabric? And so that's like the beautiful, happy thing. And then awakening to love can also be you're heartbreaking. When you awaken to love, when you open yourself to love, when you allow yourself to feel, especially in places that have been numb or frozen or just quiet or dry, along with that comes tenderness. Along with that comes susceptibility to feeling how cruel we can be to each other. Oh, love awakens me, it wakes me up, and that feels beautiful and inspiring and exciting. And it also leaves me available to feeling the impact that things have on us when they're not of love, or feeling the impact of fear more clearly in our bodies, feeling the impact of harm more clearly in our bodies, just encompassing the whole experience. There's a card, the Three of Swords, and you guys have heard me talk about this before. But when my son was born, my mother did his numerology, and she said, are you sure you want the Three of Swords as one of his cards? And I did a lot of meditation on it. And what came to me was, as much as you want to protect your children, as much as you want to cease for there to be harm in the world, there is something about the experience of harm, the experience of heartbreak here on this plane, in this earth school that we're experiencing, that tenderizes you and that makes you available to courage. It makes you, makes me so emotional even saying this, makes you available to love. So do we want there to be heartbreak? No, of course not. Do we want to feel the swords pierce the soft, tender tissue of our heart? Of course not. But that's part of what we're here to endure and experience and survive. And so wherever you are in your personal journey, or wherever you are in the collective momentum, collective movements, collective awakening, understanding that it hurts, and our ability to survive and compost that hurt turns us into real humans, turns us into compassionate beings, allows a level of courage and connection, and I would say desire to emerge that couldn't emerge without that. So when I meditate, and then I always say this too, but my cousin Jenny has the same card, that Three of Swords, in her birth chart. And Jenny and Griffin, my two G's, like, they're both such courageous humans and able to hold such a consistency across experience that I find deeply admirable. And I think of that card now, because of the two of them, as the card of the lion-hearted. And I think a lot about the other image that comes to mind is the people, gosh, sorry, I didn't realize I was so emotional today, is the people at the front line. So I used to think about it as like Doctors Without Borders, people who would travel to places that were war-torn or where there were no resources, and they would put themselves on the front line. And sorry, I guess this is just real. And put themselves on the front line and sit with people at their most vulnerable, in the most vulnerable situations, and be able to calmly sit with them and say, I'm here. Think about it now with people who are willing to fight for and even make joy and art and play out of the protest of the affront to our humanity that is the US government right now. And I think about the things that move you so deeply that they force you to step onto the stage, and whatever that means for you to step into the fray, whatever that means, without fear. Or maybe not without fear, but without hesitation. Even with the fear, you know where you're meant to be. So I hope that that was part of your experience last week, and I just honor the fact that I can say awakening to love, and it sounds beautiful, and it is beautiful, but it doesn't come without grief, and it doesn't come without fear, and it doesn't come without like vulnerability and tenderness. The more willing we are to allow our heart to remain open, the more we feel, and the more we feel, the wilder it gets. And that's a beautiful thing, but we're also human, and we're also like tender creatures. And so to open yourself up to that is so important. And it's also the warrior's path. Call that the warrior's path for a reason. So I acknowledge that that is also part of the experience that occurred last week. And it's not like we just pulled the Ace of Cups, right? We pulled the Tower with the Ace of Cups. There's a shaking of the system that is necessary and part of our evolution, and also difficult. So just acknowledging the whole range of that. I'm gonna tell you. You want to hear a story? Okay, skip this if you don't want to hear a story. You want to get to the card. The card I pulled for us this week is the Devil. FYI. Okay, so here's the story for you. Most of you know this, have been single since the spring, and purposefully single, like not dating, not speaking to other people, like just focusing on taking care of myself, coming back to myself. The end of my relationship was incredibly draining, and I just forgot who I was and needed to kind of come back to myself. And part of that experience has been an experience with my body. So taking really good care of my body, having almost a wild love affair with my own body. And that sounds sexy, but it's also about the foods I eat, and it's about how I move through my day, and it's about how I strengthen myself. It really has to do with like, how would my own best lover, like how would they structure my day? And then structuring my day that way, like taking care of myself with that level of tenderness and care. And part of that experience is connected to what we're doing in Wild Woman this month, which is moving from how it feels to me. So structuring my time, saying yes, saying no, because it feels like what I want. It feels good in my body. And part of what the Wild Woman discovery will help you uncover is how most people are operating outside in. Most people are operating, well, how does it look? How am I perceived? What is the judgment? What does it look like? Am I accepted and approved? And I don't say that with judgment or why would you do that? I do it too. It's how women mostly are trained to inhabit their bodies. We learn how to measure how it looks, how we look, before we measure how we feel. We kind of put our needs secondary at best. And so when you start to navigate that way, it's really nice. If you have, thankfully, I have a lot of resources and power in my life, and I can make choices that are aligned with that. I've set up my life to have a lot of freedom that way, and I can move accordingly to what feels appropriate and right and good and nourishing for me. It doesn't mean I don't work hard, but it means that even when I work hard, I'm choosing that. That's a choice I get to make. And I'm just now starting to orient to partnership, relationship, romance, all of that. So while I was in that bubble, my energy was like, don't come anywhere near me. And that was a good, safe bubble. And then as I move out into the world, my energy opens towards other. And one weird thing that keeps happening to me, and it's really been like, what do you call that? Like a craw, like something stuck in my, like really bothering me. And I can't figure out why it bothers me. So I'm going to share this story with you and share with you what I came up with. And I do think it's very telling about the distinction between moving from the inside out and then noticing how quickly the world tries to convince us to move from the outside in. Okay. So there's a gentleman in yoga who approaches me after every class. I am not interested. It's not welcome, but he is persistent. And yoga to me, because we also know I'm not a great athlete, yoga to me is a prayer. I go and I get on the mat every day as a prayer and a devotion and a dedication to my body, to say to my body, I'm with you, to say to my body, you matter, to say to my body, like this, you are precious and sacred, and I'm going to attend to you in a way that's loving. So when I'm on the yoga mat, it probably doesn't look very good, but it feels right, and it feels strengthening, and it feels very loving. So for me, yoga is like a prayer. Like when I go to yoga, I don't go to perform, I go to be, and I have a lovely studio here that really supports that. And so when this gentleman comes up to me after class every day and he comments on what I'm wearing or he comments on my practice, I find it super offensive. And it came to me that I find it so offensive because it would be like witnessing someone at prayer and then stopping them on their way out of the church and being like, I like what you wore to prayer today. And I really noticed that you're dedicated to prayer and you're doing a great job praying. It's like, how dare you? How dare you speak to me in this space that I'm in? This is like sacred space to me. How dare you perceive me in that? And and comment like you have any right to be here. That's the way I feel. And I've noticed that I have to defend myself against this energy, which sucks because I love this yoga studio and I love this yoga class. I've noticed like I notice him in space and I'm trying to orient around him and I'm trying not to put my mat anywhere near him and all of that. And it really got under my skin. And I was in practice the other day and I was like thinking about how he was perceiving me. And then I've been working with Ganesha a lot, my beautiful elephant with his belly pushed up against my face. And so I said to Ganesha, like, what is this, right? And that whole prayer analogy came to mind. And then I realized that I still have in my system ways in which I orient to manage his messy desire, his messy behavior. And I don't need to do that. Like I am not in physical danger. I could kick his ass if I wanted to. This is not an unsafe place for me. But then wiring in me to make myself smaller, to keep him at a distance runs deep. And so the invitation for me in my like meditation on this, in my prayer around this, in my yoga practice was, Kirsten, this too is a gift. You need to remember what you're here to do, and you're here to stay in your body. You're here to stay in what you want and to not orient to what someone else would expect or what his desires or whatever. It literally makes me want to vomit. I find it like disgusting. So anyways, so I sat there with, and then Ganesha, who I'm working with, I said to Ganesha, like, what is this? And he showed up on my mat. And my version of Ganesha is so beautiful. Like he's just this big, lovely elephant with this light emanating from him. And he put his like little trunk against my cheek and he just sat at the end of my mat. And then I like could feel myself enveloped by him. And that was when the language came through, like, this too is a gift. This too is a reminder that you don't need to move in the world you don't need to be outside looking in. You can stay inside. You are safe to stay inside. I tell you this long story because the learning for me, and especially as a woman who's thinking about a relationship, thinking about what I want next in a partner, if I want a partner, because my life is pretty freaking beautiful right now, and I need a partner who's going to add to that peace and add to that beauty. But what I realized was there are men in my life who allow me to inhabit my body more fully. And there are men in my life whose own nervous systems, own attention is like running at a frequency that asks me to also step outside of my body and begin to orient again from the outside in. And this is an example of a man who's doing this in like a very extreme, icky way. And so it's easy for me to be like, I'm such a clear no to this on every possible level. So I'm able to, but my compassionate heart is like, oh, poor guy. Like, he's just trying to be friends and trying to give him the benefit of the doubt. And that's none of my business. His impact is wild and messy and inappropriate. My job is not to like manage myself to keep me away from that. It's to fully inhabit myself and use that as a choice and a practice to not get pulled out of me. Because there are partnerships, relationships, work, community that is going to allow you to inhabit yourself and feel more clearly what you're feeling versus how you're being perceived. And there are people, communities, men, friendships, partnerships, like creative endeavors that are going to jolt you outside of your body and have you tangled up in how you're perceived. And I'm just sharing this with you because I'm practicing this and I can experience this on both sides. And it's still difficult. I still run into roadblocks with it, but this too is a gift. So I've said this to you guys before, but even these like minor things, like this shouldn't occupy my attention that this man is doing this. But because it's occupying so much of my attention, especially in my practice, which is normally a very peaceful place, it's revealing to me so much. It's like waving a red flag and trying to say, "Look at this. This is something to notice. This is something you can practice with. This is something you can learn from. This too is a gift." And it's that I think it's the Mary Oliver, right? Someone gave me a box full of darkness, and then I realized this too is a gift. It's all a gift. It's all teaching you. So it brings me back again to the larger dynamic right now. Is our heart cracking when we see the way that humans are treating humans, the way that power is being wielded in the world right now? Yes. Is that also a gift? I believe yes. And it's like hard to say and hard to stomach. And I'm also saying that from a safe place. And so it's a huge caveat to this. But this may not be a safe place forever. And will I still believe that? I hope so. I hope I'll still have the perspective to stay with who I am, to stay with my heart, to stay with what I know to be right, and to not let anyone pull me out of that. And that's why I say to you always, come back to your breath. When you feel yourself feeling anything, angry, afraid, rageful, hopeless, come back to your breath. Give your body permission to stay online and give it the possibility to stay online and continue to do that. And that over time will build a safe place in your own system, will build a place of congruence in your own system. And that will be more powerful than maybe you can anticipate, or maybe you can really even know until you've tried to experience that. And then my last point is for when you are navigating things, relationships, people, romance, partnership, work, community, notice where you are invited more fully into your body in that space. There's a more natural movement into, what does this feel like for me? Do I have permission here to feel what this is like for me? And what are the places that bring you out into perception, out into protective mode? And there's something to notice about that. There's something to be said about choosing to be in places where that allowance to start here, stay here is more accessible for you. And then you can bring it to more challenging environments, but start like by noticing the close in, the places in you. Are you allowed to be here? And for many people, their home, I think COVID cleared a lot of that out, but hopefully your home is a place where you can inhabit yourself. And if it's not, I would begin there. Begin with your own time alone, and I would begin with your own personal space and notice how fully you're allowed to inhabit that, and then start there. Okay, so that's my story time. I hope it's helpful. But this was like such a lesson for me in how quickly something even negative and almost inconsequential could bring me out of myself. And I have the contrasting awareness to notice it very clearly and very quickly. And so the invitation to come back to my fullness, to come back to what is right for me, to again prioritize my nervous system and my needs over making things nice for someone else, making things pleasant, keeping the peace, yada, yada, yada. So, which brings us to the devil card this week ahead. Okay, the devil can mean so many things. He's our little friend. But most importantly, the devil is the inverse of the lovers. So the devil is where choice has been taken from us. The devil is where we are bound and in service unconsciously. So the truth is that we are all in service to something. We are all bound. Again, like the most simple ways, we're bound to our bodies. We're bound to this earth. We're bound to the community that we're in some ways. We can change that, but here we are. And do you choose that, right? So something that can happen is that we can make a choice or a commitment, and it can be a conscious choice at the time. And over time, it can be something we just do, and we lose the perspective on whether that's still serving us, whether we still choose that. So the devil card is always going to bring you face to face with the places where you feel like you have no choice. And it's going to ask you to look more clearly at that, bring that into consciousness. The devil can have to do with obsession. It can have to do with passion. It can have to do with our carnal pleasure. So the devil in a good way can be like, I'm bound to this body. Am I satisfying it? Am I giving it the touch, the pleasure? This is a card of fetish and kink and things that we maybe feel shame around, but we want to kind of get into the choice around that. The things that turn you on, there's nothing wrong with that. And there's a responsibility for not causing harm. So both of those things are true. And part of your responsibility is to get to know your sexual body, your physical, your carnal hunger in a way that is not in shadow and is not out and doing funny things. You want to bring that onto the page. And who said that recently? I thought it was so interesting, that our sexual energy is the last gate of self-development. We don't really touch that until we've done all the other stuff. And I kind of believe that's so backwards. I think that so much of what runs the show is our desires. And so knowing what those are, knowing what satisfies that, knowing what of that needs to be clarified and integrated is so important. And if you become a more deeply embodied, more empowered person, to think that your sexual energy is distinct from your life force, your vitality, your spiritual energy, I think is a huge mistake. I think it's just a fallacy. I think anything that separates the spiritual from the material is, in my opinion, inherently flawed. I think that those two things, as this experience of humanity, those things are woven together so deeply, they cannot be separated from each other. So the devil will really bring you in touch with your body. The devil will bring you in touch with things you might be holding in shadow. So things that might be unconscious, that might be running the show unconsciously. But mostly there's a thought around choice. There's a thought around bindings, a choice around devotion and service and what you are willing to sacrifice yourself for. So the devil energy is saying your life is one of sacrifice. You are spending your time and energy doing something. And the devil, it confronts you with that and says, do you choose this still? Social media, technology, the phone is like, if you think about your days, and I know I spend too much time on my phone. I can use my children as an excuse. I can use my work as an excuse. But is there some part of me checking out or disassociating into something that is a choice, and yet I might have a million reasons why I need to choose it or why it has to be that way? The devil card's going to bring our awareness to that. The devil card is inherently about relating. It's about both internal relations, so my divine feminine, my toxic feminine, my divine masculine, my toxic masculine, how that gang's hanging out, like what's happening there in that internal dialogue. Comes back to what I was saying. Notice if you are allowed to inhabit your body and feel your needs and wants when you're by yourself. There are many people, so there's no shame in this, many people who've for 20, 30, 40, 50 years been taught to orient to others first, to orient towards the system first, to manage the system before they manage themselves, to manage the system at the sacrifice of themselves. And the devil card is, did you see you're doing that? Did you notice that all the ways you're talking about how everyone else needs to change, but you're not a safe place for yourself? Do you see how you put yourself on the altar, how you sacrifice yourself? That's going to come up with the devil card as well. So this idea of where are you sacrificing your precious time, and does it feel good? Does it feel right? Does it feel like you still choose this? The very boring one. I've said it 1,000 times on this podcast, but the moment where as a mother, you're like, well, me as a mother, I'll speak for myself, where I'm like, I cannot come up with another dinner. What do you mean I have to make dinner again tonight? What do you mean I have to go back to the grocery store? And the reorientation, which can sound so ungrateful to the right ears, but there's also like the truth of it. Every day, freaking have to come up with something to feed everyone. And this idea of I don't have to make dinner, I get to make dinner. I get to put my healthy body in my working car, go to my amply supplied grocery store, choose whatever I want, put it together in a beautiful way, and watch my children consume healthy foods as we talk and laugh and spend time together. I mean, when you put it that way, Kirsten, how do I ever complain, right? But we get into this kind of trap, these chains, these bindings where we say, oh man, not again. It's like, no, check yourself. What would you rather happen? Are you happy that your children are in your home and you can feed them a healthy meal? 100%. Okay, so I choose that binding. I choose the fact that I need to put some magical dinner on the and not magical, sometimes it's not magical, but some healthy dinner on the table every night, and I can reorient around that. So that's like a silly kind of basic one, and yet any mother knows it's a huge difference sitting in the kitchen being like, "I get to do this," versus, "Oh my god, I've had it, I'm done." So the devil is gonna bring our awareness to that. What else will I say about the devil? My famous personal tarot story about the devil is when Hillary Clinton was running against Trump. And listen, I mean, make no mistake about my politics on this show. Like, I am not a huge fan of the Democratic Party, but I am a liberal through and through. And I believe in human rights and I believe in protecting the vulnerable among us. And those things have never changed. The idea that when Hillary and Trump were running against each other, and at the time, the thought was like, I kind of was like, of course she'll win. And Hillary Clinton, you can take her or leave her. But the idea of having a woman president was a really big deal at the time. And I remember how proud I was to go vote for her and what it meant to me. I didn't even realize. You talk about representation, you talk about putting people in power, and you get it. But then when you see someone ascend to a level where they haven't been before, and you get to collude in that, you get to celebrate that, there's something so powerful that happens. And I remember being so proud to show my daughters that she was running and all of that. And then the night of the election, I remember pulling a card to see what was going to happen. It was the devil. And I remember being like, oh my God, Trump's going to win. And then I remember saying, okay, then what would that mean? Why would that come? And the thought was because we need to excavate all of the darkness, all of the bindings, all of the commitments, all of the sacrifices we've made that we're not agreeing to anymore, like we're not conscious of. Like this country was built on the bones of oppression, of harm, of violence. And the idea that it also has freedom there, right? It also has expansiveness and possibility, but there's darkness in our bones and there's darkness in our foundation. And I knew that him getting elected was part of a great excavation that was going to come. Unfortunately, those roots run deep and we're still watching that happen. But I do come back to that because I do come back to this idea that there is a necessary purging of some of these really dark, really harmful egregores that exist in our system. And Trump is is holding the position of the one who helps us see. And it's ugly what we see, but it also it always existed. And this came up in Wild Woman the other day in one of our conversations. We don't always want to look at the ugliness, the darkness, the commitments, the sacrifices, the bindings, but they exist. So whether we are willing to look at them or not, they still activate and run part of the show. And so part of getting free is looking at what's happening in our own system and being willing, and the system, and being willing to look at the darkness and look at the hard things and survive them and say like, okay, I'm not going to turn from what is anymore. Because the last thing I'll say, even if like belief or not belief, energetically, what it takes to hold things that are true in shadow, in hiding, it takes a lot. You sacrifice a lot of your vitality keeping things at bay, keeping things in shadow. And that's why congruence, why integrity is such a powerful song, because most people are not willing to look at the ugly things. And part of what the devil is excavating for us collectively, communally, but also in this week ahead personally, will be the darkness that we hold at bay, the things that we would rather not shine the light on. So that's there with devil energy. But mostly it's about noticing where there's a perceived lack of choice and maybe your eyes opening a little bit more to the power you do hold. And everything I've said over this podcast, this very long, chatty weekly podcast, is that you have more power than you realize. This too is a gift. And so when we begin to orient to life being a reflection, a mirror, like a workable art, and we sit with what is and we don't turn away from the things that even when they're difficult, there's something trying to get released, trying to be understood, trying to be liberated in that. And the devil card could not be a more perfect picture of that, illustration of that. The other two cards that came up kind of at the bottom of the deck were Temperance and the Ten of Wands reverse, which says to me, it's good that this is happening. It's not going to happen in an overwhelming way. Temperance is going to bring a type of tempering to it. And at the same time, a type of, again, like these destiny tracks. Like this is something we had to see. This is something we had to know for our own alchemization of what's next. And the Ten of Wands reverse says that it's going to help you put something down that maybe you've been carrying for a long time. Sometimes we don't even realize we've been carrying something. We don't even realize something's a burden or a bind to us until we are free of it, or until we see it from a different perspective, and then we're able to put it down or shift how we carry it, right? It's not the load you carry, it's how you carry it. That is the key lesson of the Ten of Wands, particularly the Ten of Wands reversed. Listen, I hope that winding podcast was helpful. I hope it brings you some information, clarity, perspective that was helpful. And I know that it's very draining to be in the world and of the world right now. And I at least will be a voice saying to you, you get to take your time. You get to inhabit your body. You get to move in a way that is loving. You get to be a safe place for yourself. That is all possible. And that does not prohibit you from engaging. It doesn't prohibit you from being part of the change you want to see in the world. My argument, my thesis, if I had to write one right now, would be that it's the only way we can change what's happening, is to learn, what does it feel like to be safe? And how can I be that for myself? And how can I then, when I feel ready, be that for more people, for more community, in my relationships, in my home. Aho, mamas and papas, and sending you so much love. And I will talk to you very, very soon.